This first one comes from Ryer, who is in North Dakota. Ryer writes, Eddie, love your show. Really enjoyed the LA Invasion with Ace Frehley and Taylor Hawkins. I hope you can get your bowling partner, Dave Grohl, on the show sometime to talk rock. That would be an exciting conversation. Well, Ryer, I certainly mentioned it to Dave when I saw him at D.O. Bowling, and we are in touch, and hopefully we'll be able to do that sometime in the very near future. He's working on a Foo Fighters record right now. Ryer's email continues, have you ever met or interviewed Al Jourgensen of Ministry? He's an interesting character and would make a fascinating interview. I'm a huge Ministry fan and would love to hear your thoughts on the band. Okay, so Ryer, interesting timing that you asked me about this, because about a month ago I hosted a festival in Tennessee called Exit 111, and on the bill was Ministry. And I saw Al for the first time in a long time at that festival. And we talked for quite a while, actually. And that we watched Cheap Trick together at that festival. And Al actually jumped up on stage and did a song with Cheap Trick. Al was actually staying in the same hotel as I was. And we talked for quite a bit. I've always liked Al. He's an outspoken guy. Even if I don't agree with all his positions on some things, I find him very entertaining. And his book, man, if you've ever read his book, it's remarkable. One of those books where you read it and you're like, wow, this guy is still alive who wrote this thing, because Al was out of his mind. And he's still pretty much the same guy. Although I think he's leveled it off to just smoking cigarettes and drinking beer at this point. But he still walks it and talks it and is the same guy and is really a pioneer of industrial music. You can't take that away from the guy. Now, I did not see Ministry play. Of course, they also were on the recent Slayer tour as an opening act. And in all honesty, I am not that into industrial music. I respect it. I respect what Al has done and the ground he broke, but it's not my thing musically so much. And I didn't get a chance to see him play at the festival with Ministry because I was pulled in some different directions. But Al told me, see, Ministry used to be managed by my old boss at Megaforce, Johnny Z, so I knew him a little bit back then, like 20 years ago or so. And Al told me when I saw him in Tennessee that there is going to be a sequel to his book, which came out. So maybe once that book hits and I have a chance to read it, that'll be a good time to do something with Al Jourgensen. So I would certainly welcome him on the show. I think we'd have a lot of fun talking. I don't know how much common ground there is musically, but what the heck? I'd be open to doing it. And we'll look into that maybe around the time of his next book. Next email comes from Ed. And Ed is, does Ed write where he's from? Ed is from New York. And he writes here, Eddie, I drove from Long Island to catch Ghost at Glen Falls Arena. Tobias Forge has replaced a lot of tracks with musicians. What a difference. Best they sounded out of the 5 times I've seen them. Now I research who plays live prior to buying a ticket. I encourage others to do the same. Thank you. Ed, you're preaching to the choir, my friend. You are preaching to the choir. Now, it's interesting that you say this about Tobias and Ghost, because when he was on this show, I don't know, I guess that was about a year ago when he was in the studio, I brought this up to him. And he was transparent and honest about the fact that he is using some supplementation in terms of vocal tracks at that time. And he explained to me that at the time he was doing it because he did not have the capability or the budget to hire musicians to execute the sound he wanted live, and that he had hoped to phase the tracks out as his career grew and he could afford to hire real live musicians. So according to Ed's email here, that has happened, and that's a wonderful, wonderful thing to hear. And it's interesting that Ed writes that they sounded better in his view, and it made a huge difference, and it was the best he ever heard Ghost sound with real musicians. Because most would say, well, you can't sound better than a track or the computer. But actually you can. I mean, there's a certain real quality when you're hearing somebody really singing into a microphone. The live experience isn't supposed to be exactly perfect. You want that human, real live element. So that can absolutely add to a real, organic live sound, which is what you are going to a live show for. The other thing, and I'll going back to Exit 111, so I watched Def Leppard, who do sing all live and real. And I watched them side stage last month at Exit 111 with Tobias Forge. We stood together and talked and watched a little bit of the show. And it wasn't meant as a backhanded thing or anything, but we were watching, and he came up to my ear and he said something like, wow, he goes, he was pointing to Rick Savage. He goes, he almost looks the same from a distance. And I said, yeah, I said, they sometimes almost sound the same too. I said, you know what's amazing? They all actually sing live. And he looked at me and goes, yeah. So I don't know if he went back to his trailer. He's like, shit, trunk is on the case. Get rid of the tracks. I doubt it. But he had said that was something he wanted to, he was going to look into doing. So I'm glad if that's the case. I haven't seen him play live in a while, but that's a great thing to hear. Thank you for that email, Ed. This is from David, and he is listening in New Jersey, and he writes, Eddie, I always listen to your show on demand. So when you said you were doing a mailbag show, I thought I would send you a message. Well, that's exactly why we do it, David, so thanks. He continues, I went to see Alice Cooper Hailstorm show in Camden, New Jersey over the summer. After Hailstorm finished their first or second song, don't remember exactly, Lizzie Hale said to the audience, hi, we are Hailstorm. We sing and play all of our own instruments. I thought you'd like to know this because you talk about so often how many bands play to tracks these days. Thanks, I've been a fan of yours since the DHA days. Well, thank you, Dave. DHA being the first radio station I ever worked at in New Jersey back in the 80s. So you are certainly a longtime listener. And look, this, ironically, the second email in a row that we're getting on this topic, which I admit has absolutely been a soapbox topic of mine and will continue to be so because it is incredibly important. And Dave's email supports that. I've said this countless times. The artists that actually are singing and playing completely live, like Lizzie Hale, who has also been outspoken about this to some degree, they want the credit for doing it, and they should get it. Look, very few established bands are going to call out by name the bands that aren't actually performing live or singing and playing live. Because it's awkward. They need to see these people at some point. They might be touring with them. They might be on festivals. It's awkward about potentially, outing them, if you will. But the backhanded way for them to do it without saying anything about anyone else on the bill is by making sure everybody knows they are doing it live. Keep your ears and eyes open for the others. Let's see. Some of these emails are really, really long, guys. So if you are sending me stuff for the mailbag in the future, as I often say, please keep it to a sentence or two because some of it's really, really too long to read through on the air the way I do this. And just reading the emails alone, what you're saying could take a lot of time. Let's see. This is from KG. What is the chance of / Duff McKagan Chad Smith, 3 awesome musicians being Ozzy Osbourne's band on the tour next year in America. They did play on his new album, right? That would be incredible. Okay, so what KG is referring to is correct in that these musicians make an appearance on Ozzy Osbourne's new solo record. I don't think Slash is on the whole record. I think Slash is only on a track or two. I don't know about Duff and Chad if they played on the entire record. The likelihood of them being Ozzy's backing band for the tour is highly unlikely. Chad Smith hasn't even been able to do much with Chickenfoot and some other things he wants to do because of the Chili Peppers touring. As far as Duff and Slash are concerned, I don't know what they have cooking for next year. Presumably, Guns N' Roses is, at least for the time being, done. I don't know what Miles' situation is, meaning that would tie into whether Slash would be able to tour or not with the Conspirators, and I don't know what Duff is doing. Look, it's not, KG, it's not a crazy thing, but I don't see Slash being Ozzy's full-time guitar player and touring with him. He's done some guest spots. I think that's about it. And the same with Duff. I don't know if Duff would necessarily be the full-time touring bass player at this point. And, you know, you bring up a good question. Is Ozzy's live band still going to be the band he has had, which is Tommy Clufados, Blasco, and Zach? Because we know those guys were not part of the new record. That being said, that doesn't necessarily mean they won't do the tour. Here's the other thing that works against Slash going out and trying to do a full tour with Ozzy. Ozzy needs a tremendous amount of help live singing. And Zach does that. Zach covers his voice big time and carries the load big time on the stage live. If you've seen Ozzy recently, there's a point where Zach actually does a time on stage with Ozzy not even out there. Ozzy needs that desperately. Slash is not going to do that. He's not a singer. He's not that guy that's going to do that. He'll stand there and solo for 10 minutes, but he's not going to really sort of front the band while you know, Ozzy goes back and gets oxygen or whatever the hell he's doing. So I don't see that happening. I think, assuming Ozzy is healthy enough to actually tour, my take is you'll probably get the band you've always had, and whatever new songs are played, Zach is just going to learn them, as will the other guys.